Welcome to this yet another session on research methodology. Today we will be doing questionnaires and I am Dr. Verma from the Department of Special Education. Have you gone to the malls recently? If you have you noticed young boys and girls asking you to fill up a form? Do you fill up just one question or do you fill up many questions? Yes, we fill up a number of questions which they ask us. Sometimes we answer those, sometimes we fill them up, sometimes we just ignore them. Today what we are going to do is questionnaires, and this is what the people at the mall give it to us to fill up, which is called a questionnaire. Now, questionnaire is one of the most commonly used self-reporting instruments, where the respondents write their answers to printed questions. When we went to the mall and they handed over a piece of paper to us, it had a set of questions which they expected us to answer. Now, questionnaires are used to test and explore relationships and also to validate assumptions. Generally, it is used in surveys to obtain demographic information. Now, what is the purpose of a questionnaire? When we are asking the same questions to everybody, it ensures standardization. There is consistency in the questions, there is consistency in the instructions, there is consistency in also the group of people you want to survey. And there's comparability of the data across interviews. In the sense when I say that when I'm interviewing or when I'm giving a questionnaire to somebody, I want to give it to all the housewives. So the data that I get from all the housewives will then be comparable. It increases the speed and accuracy of recording, because if I go and interview each and every person, it will take a lot of time. And also at the same time, there would be a lot of personal bias which may also come in. Hence, it is increasing the speed and accuracy of recording. It also facilitates data processing and enables the researcher to collect the relevant information which addresses the problem. Now, questionnaires can be administered through postal surveys. Many a times through our mails, we get questionnaires and people request us to fill up those questionnaires and to mail it back to them. There can also be a face-to-face interviews when we go to the mall and they ask us questions and they fill it up themselves. Or you get a lot of researchers coming to you and they say that they're doing a survey, please will you answer a few questions. Then there is also a telephone survey where somebody can ring you up and get the relevant information. There can be direct observation and also now these days through the computer or the internet. So these are the various ways through which a questionnaire can be administered. Now we also need to see the criteria to which we need to consider when we are doing a questionnaire. And the first thing is that any questionnaire that we are preparing should provide the necessary information. While we are preparing, we should consider who the respondent is. What is the age of the respondent? What is my population going to be? So considering the respondent, that is who will be your sample or your population, is what is important. And also, does it meet the requirements of editing, coding and data processing? So these are the things or the criteria that we need to consider while we are preparing a questionnaire. And if your questionnaire is not properly designed, it will have incomplete information, it will give you inaccurate data, and it would also cost higher because the questionnaire, you've spent so much of effort, you've spent so much of time, you've trained people to conduct that survey for you, and then it is of no use because your questions have not been properly framed. So what are the things that are required when we are designing the questionnaire? The first thing is to determine the objectives. What is it that I want to measure? So you need to plan what you want to measure first. The second thing is to decide on the format. How am I going to get that information? Whether I'm going to send a postal survey, whether I'm going to ring them up and ask them questions, whether I will go to a particular place where I know that my respondents would be present over there, and also then to formulate questions to obtain the needed information. We also need to decide on the wording of the questions. How are we going to word it? Sometimes we read a question and then we say, but I don't understand, what does this measure? I don't understand what you want to say. So the questions should be worded very carefully in very simple language that it does not need further explanations. Decide on the question sequence and also the layout of the questionnaire. Sometimes we may be having all positive questions together, we may be having all negative questions together. So then there is a mindset on the part of the responder to keep ticking mark because I know what the next question is going to be. Using a sample, test the questionnaires for omissions. So what we need to do is that take a small sample, test it out for wording, for your layout, also for any omissions, any additions which require, and also if there is any ambiguity in your questions. Correct the problems if necessary, and whatever you come out or you find out through your pretest, that is the time when you can resolve the errors which are there. You can correct, you can modify, and also at the same time, if possible, then do a pretest again so that you know that, okay, now my questionnaire is now ready to be implemented or to be used. Now, decisions in designing a questionnaire is the first thing that we need to decide is the content. What should be asked, and the content would be based upon the problem that you are going to measure. The wording, that is, how should each question be phrased? Am I going to ask clear-cut questions? Am I going to ask interpretive questions where let the respondent think and answer? In what sequence am I going to put these questions? That is, in what order should the questions be presented? And finally, it is the layout, that is, what design or layout or plan will best serve the research objectives. The most difficult step in specifying exactly what information is to be collected from each respondent, we need to list down all these before we prepare a questionnaire. Now, when we talk about the content, which is the questions, we need to consider 5 things, or there should meet 5 requirements. And the first one is that do the questions pertain to the research problems? Is there any relevance with the research problem? Sometimes you want to measure something, but you're asking some other questions which is not in any way pertinent to your research problem. Do they accurately depict the attitudes, behaviors, opinions that we intend to investigate? Sometimes what happens is that you have questions, but it is not measuring actually what you intend to measure. You're trying to find out about opinions on a certain thing, and it has all other things but questions on opinions. Do the respondents qualify as respondents? That is, do they match your sample size selection? Are they the same sample that you intend working upon? Now, I went to a mall with my teenage daughters, and as I entered, there was a group of young boys and who singled me out and told my daughters, can you answer this questionnaire? And then when I went to the food bazaar, there was another group of people who singled them out and came to me asking for questions. Now, can you tell me why were we singled out at 2 different places? The reason is very simple, that when we entered, the young boys and girls who had targeted my daughters was because they wanted to find out about the new modern trends in fashion, which probably because of my age and my dressing, Probably they thought that I would not be able to respond to that question. And also, maybe also I was not part of that target population or sample that they were targeting at. I was not a respondent. Whereas when I went to the food bazaar, they asked me questions because that was meant for people who were my age, the people who were running a household, who were managing a house, who were buying things for the house. And I was a more qualified respondent. The second thing, the fourth thing that we need to remember is that do the respondents understand the questions properly? Are they able to interpret the question in the same way as we intend interpreting it? And will the respondents give the information? Sometimes when you are taking information or you are filling up a questionnaire, many a times what happens is that the respondents flatly refuse. Now, if the respondents refuse, which means if they are not willing to give that information, then we should not persist or trouble them after that.